everyone, I'm Radu and I'm delighted to show you today what are controllers in Vapor. It's not like view controllers in an iOS application, it's something else. We're going to find out what they are, and then we're going to dip into route collection, routes builder, and routes. What is a controller in Vapor? It's some kind of a struct or a class that encapsulate logic related to request handling. You group methods and you can maintain and make your code base more modular. These kind of controllers in Vapor are like conforming to route collection, which requires you to implement one method. It's called boot, and the parameter is called routes. Inside of this method, you're responsible to register the controller's routes within the application's system. For example, you have a user's controller, you might define methods to create user, retrieve them from the database if you want, update them, and delete them. So encapsulate all users' logic into one thing called user's controller. What is a route collection? Well, it's a protocol where you define a blueprint. By conforming to this protocol, a controller can register all its routes in a centralized manner. Now, if we dig a level further down the stream, we have a routes builder. And again, it's a protocol that provides an interface for adding routes to the application. Those routes are basically the HTTP methods that we use in the application, and we can associate them with handler or other functions. For example, we can group like we did before. We say routes.grouped, and we have the users where we define the specific routes for that collection. Finally, we saw what is a route. It basically maps the requests that are coming to your Vapor application. Your HTTP requests are coming, and then you group them. So you register the routes, and this allows you to create a very dynamic web service. Cool. Let's see it in action, how we can use controllers. Thank you.
Right, so I'm in the directory where the web server is located, and I'm going to open package.swift. So my Vapor app gets opened inside Xcode. You can open it from Xcode, but if you double click package.swift, it will automatically be opened by Xcode. And from last time, if you remember, we had a structure person, which is implementing this content protocol, which is like a codable for Vapor. And it has two properties, name, date of birth. I simplified the routes function a bit and left just the decoder for the date of birth and has a date format like this, and kept the key decoding strategy convert from snake case and apply this configuration to my content configuration global setting. And I have one route, it works. If I run the project, let's check it in Postman, server started. If I'm going to Postman and send a request to the local host, I can see it's up and running. I will stop. And I have this person. I would like to place it in a separate file. Let's create one folder here called entities. And I cut the content here. Now I do Command V and Xcode will paste here the structure. I will have to import Vapor because I have this content which is part of the Vapor framework. Here a folder controllers. And this time in this video, I would like to create a controller for my person. It's not the view controller like we had in iOS apps with UI kit. It's a Vapor controller related to the routes and routes collection. So I'm creating an empty file. Let's call it PersonsController. I will delete the header, import Vapor. Let's create first a structure, PersonsController, which implements the route collection. What happens if I do that? Type PersonsController does not conform to protocol. Okay, so it asks me to implement a method. The method is called boot, has one parameter routes, and is part of the Vapor framework. I can delete Vapor because it's already imported, and throws something. If I'm checking route collection, command click here, I'm going to Vapor package, and I see here it's a simple protocol which groups the collections of routes together for adding to my controller, to the router. It has this boot function that takes in the routes builder. It's a protocol with a function add route. See that route is finally a concrete implementation, a concrete class, which conforms to custom string convertible and the sendable protocol. It has some interesting parameters here, such as the method, the path, the responder, the request type, and so on. And here is a nice description. If you print it, you'll see this part with the joint and so on of the path, and gets you a nice print object like this one. Okay, so nothing fancy, very simple implementation. And now, what's the purpose of this persons controller? Well, we want to group everything that we do for persons. Like if we want to create a person, if we want to read the person, update or even delete a person, I would like for those routes, for those methods to be part this controller. This will like help us structure better our code, understand better where we want to modify some things, and it keeps consistency with our code base, making stuff cleaner and better rather than having everything here in the routes function. Imagine here if we have like a complicated application or even a simple one, we could have a lot of stuff inside the routes function. So let's use this controller to group the things related to our person entity. If you remember, we had the thing called group, and we can call it as part of the routes. We can say routes.grouped, and here I have the path components. Well, I will choose persons because whenever we hit the server URL /persons, we'll know that, okay, these things, this path, these routes need to go here inside the persons controller. And what stuff should we put here? Well, as I mentioned, we want to focus on the CRUD operation, create, read, update, and delete. So let's go ahead and create those methods. I will create first, let's create a person. What do we need? Well, we need a request to take the persons out of it, and we'll see if we want to return back. I would assume that the thing that we want to return is the person itself. What a person needs is the name and the date of birth. So what we need to do is to take something from this request. Let's call request object and have here the request that content that, if you remember, we had this function decode, and here we can say a decodable type, and our decodable type is person.set, thing that person is. All right, so we have a try here, but we have to also throw the error somewhere. All right, and what should we do? Since we don't have an actual database for the moment, I will prefer to have it inside of a global variable. Let's call it persons. And here we're going to add the persons. I'm having a warning here related to Swift 6, and it's complaining because this variable is global and it's not isolated to some kind of an actor, and it can be accessed by multiple things concurrently. And this creates some problems, race conditions, and so on. Since we have this demo, I won't focus too much on the concurrency stuff of Swift 6, and I will choose just one simple fix here from the list. I will choose this one, disable concurrency safety checks if accesses are protected by an external synchronization mechanism. What it does, it simply adds non-isolated unsafe, specifying that this variable is not isolated and it's unsafe, and the warning goes away. All right, so I have the request object, which should be a person, and let's add it to my array, request object. Since we want to know if that person has been pulled from this request, we can put a breakpoint and check, but let's just return it here. Return request object. All right, so this is our first function. And now to be able to use this function, we need to put it here in the boot function. And if you remember, we have some functions that are, we can use get, delete, whatever, but since we create something, I would like to use a post in this case. Okay, I don't need a path because I'm here inside the group. And here I need a request, and let's create the person. Since this function throws, I will just say try create person. And we are not yet done because we created this person's controller, but we need a place to say, okay, please use this controller for the application. And this is done here in routes, and we can register the collections, the controllers, and we say app, which is the application, dot register, and here we should place the person's controller, the structure that we created. This is we need a try because it can throw an error. All right, if I run the server, let's see if it's working. Server started. I'm going to check if it's working. Let's say persons. I'm using a post now. Okay, so in the body, we can place the name. Let's put John and date of birth. If you remember here inside the routes, we have to specify the date in this format, and we can put it like this, 80. Let's make it like this. And if I click send, I can see the new person has been added to my array persons controller. Here inside the persons controller, we have this John, but it would be cool to also retrieve it from there, right? Nice. All right, so this moves to, I will stop here. If I'm going to stop, this persons will become empty, of course, because I stopped the server. So if I want to read from this person's controller, most commonly we have two methods. One, we read everything, but we usually want to read entity or person in this case by something, by a field. Most likely we want to create an identifier for those objects, or we can read it by name, of course. But let's create another field here called ID, and I will name it UUID, which is of type UUID. It's a universally unique value identifier, and we can also say it's identifiable here. In our post method, we don't want to specify the ID because we don't know it yet. We want to specify the name and the date of birth. We would like for the system, for the application to create those parameters for us. We can say, we can create another initializer here. I will create it via an extension, and I can just put string and date of birth as the required parameters, and here I can generate the ID like this. And self.name equals name, self date of birth equals date of birth. Nice. And we don't need to do anything here. Or if you want to be more pragmatic, you can create a structure specific to your post, which is like the same version of a person, but you can give it a name, date of birth, exactly like a person. And here are the parameters that you like to pass as part of the post, which are not the same as the person. It has the identifier. You can safely use the same person here, but since we want to create a structure specific to this post, to the create person method. Okay, since now the request object is a create person, is not anymore a person, I'll have to transform it to my person. And because it's Swift, we can say new person, and here we can give it a name, request object dot name. So it's already transformed in the create person, and date of birth. And I can append here and return the new person, and everything should be all right. The same behavior as we had before, but in plus we now have a create person. We don't have the same model, and person has a new field called identifier. Let's create now the okay, so now I will put the mark here. Let's do the read functions. First one, get persons. What we should return here, an array of persons, of course. And since we're having the persons here, we can simply just return them. And that's and place function here because we have a function, of course. Now, if I want to select a person, I can do it by ID, get specific person, and here I will need to pass the request and return the person. This is my input. I have the request and I would like to get the person from the request. It's perfectly fine. I can say ID. It will be part of the request parameters. I'm having a get this time, and I will extract it like this. We saw in the previous video. If not, please go see it. This is how we take the ID. Now let's check if that person is actually inside my persons array, and I can do that with first where person in, and here I can say person.id equals this ID from the request. If this thing happens, I have an error, cannot convert string to UUID because I'm passing and put here as UUID self, or I can place here UUID and it should perfectly work fine. Nice. So if I have this person, let's return it. Let's put here a space. Of course, this can be simplified. You don't have to write everything here. You can do like $0 ID equals ID, and here you have the person. But what happens if we don't have a person? That's we can throw an error. Let's do an abort one and say it's not found. Have a bunch of other errors here which are specific to 4xx error codes from HTTP response. In this case, because the person is not located, I can say, okay, abort with not found. And now I need to throw it. All right, so I have two functions, get persons, and it will return the persons array, and get person from the request by the ID. Let's put them to use. And if you remember, we need to just place it inside this group, and they should be all right. This time I'm using a get. I don't need the path component for the one, but I will need for the other one. So I have the request. Try get persons. I don't need a try, actually. It's because get persons, and I don't need a request. I can simply write it like this. And the other one is get, but here I'll need a path. I will need something. If you remember, we have this ID. And here I have the request, and I need to try this time, get person from the request. Okay, so these are the two things. Let's see if they are working. Okay, let's create one. I'm having already the post. I can see the person has been returned. I'm wondering if I'm not putting a date of birth here because it's nil, if it will work. It worked. So I created another person, Jane, and it has this ID. And if I'm going to return everything like this, let's delete it. I can see here that I have two persons in an array, John and Jane, with this ID. Let's copy this ID and do it like person / the name of the ID. I can see the John object has been returned here, which is quite nice. Okay, we have the create, read. Let's do the update. We have update person, and we need the request because we'll take something from it. We're going to throws, and I would like to return also the person here, the updated person mostly. Put the ID of the person, and then we put the information in the body of the request to say, okay, update me the name, updated the date of birth, or whatever parameters that the object has. Okay, so existing person, I will get it. I already have the function, and I'm using get person from the request. First step, done. We have the existing person. Now, we need to take the request object, which is a bit different from the create person because this name parameter can be optional. So let's create one, update person content. Has the same fields, but this name is optional. Okay, so I take this, if you remember, request.content.decode, and here I'm saying I want the content to be decoded as an update person.self. Nice. We have the second step, so we have the func here. So I have the person, I have the update information that I want to pass to that person. Let's create the updated person. And I will create a new one with the same fields. First, I will like to keep the ID. I don't want to change the ID. But here, if the request object has the name, let's update it. If not, use the one that we already have. And same stuff for this date of birth. Date of birth, if not existing person, date of birth. We have the updated person. Now we need to put it here in this person's array. Since I'm not having a set, let's recreate the array, new persons array, and filter out the one that we want to update. So I'll use $ID. It's not the existing person.id. So I'm taking all persons minus the one that we're trying to update. And I will put it here with append this updated person. So first thing, delete the one that I'm already having it and put the new one with the updated properties. Cool. And I'm going to return the new person. New updated person, sorry. Okay, let's connect it here. And I said I am going to use a put this time. What do we need? So we need ID because we need to pass /ID to know what person we want to update. And in the request, we also need to take the fields that we want to update from the request. So I'm just calling the function update person. All right, so let's try the update function if it's working fine. It has a bug in it, and I will show you what it is right now. Okay, I'm not having any persons. If I do get, I see an empty array. Let's create one by doing a post, and here let's put the name John. Right, I'm having here the ID. Let's update that person I created. Let's put it Tara. I'm returning here Tara, but now if I'm doing a get and get all persons, I see still John here. Well, because if you see here those lines, we're creating the new persons array, but we're not doing anything. We're just storing it here. So we need to actually override the persons that we have here in the global variable. And let's try again. Yeah, we need to be careful because if we're doing these functions and try to update and everything, we might forget to do it inside the database, and that record is getting lost even though you say, okay, we get the object in the response. Oh, it worked. Post, I will leave Tara now. I'm having one object created, a random identifier here. I'm going to update the name. I'll put here Sarah. I'm seeing here. And let's get everything. And here it's working fine. And if I'm getting everything, I'll get Sarah here. All right, all good. Finally, we want to see this delete function. Let's do here. Let's create function. Oh, sorry. Let's create here function. I'll make it private. I call delete person. We want to have the same approach as we had for the update person, the ID of the person that we want to delete, and that's it. We don't need a body for it. We just need the ID and it should work. We need a request to take the ID from, and here we see what we return. We would like to return the deleted object, or maybe, I don't know, status. Let's see. I'm going to use this time the type inference and use the request parameters and get the ID from the parameters. Okay, if I'm having this ID, it's optional. I would want the persons to equal to persons.filter, and here the ID, which is not the one that I'm passing here. So basically filter out that persons from the persons array and override the collection here. If this ID is optional, is not part of the request, we can say throw abort, and here we can say not found, the same error that we gave it here for the get person. And we can turn this to a guard, so it's better throw, I can say here throw board, and here I don't need this if flat, I just simply take the persons and override it. And I would like to return something. Let's return the HTTP status, but usually we use no content for deletion. And these are the 20 to XXX status codes. We can use created for post, for example. And we have the same approach. Delete person. We use the persons group, and this time I'm going to use delete. ID, use the request, and try delete person request. And that's it. Let's run again. I don't have any person. I'm going to create one. Let's put John this time. I'm using a post. John, Jane. So I have two persons. I'm fetching now the get persons. Let's take the ID to see if the get is still working, but it should be fine. And let's delete this object. 204, no content. And if I'm going to hit here get, I will see that I have just one object here, which proves that the delete function worked correctly. Alright guys, thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye!